I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. On the day Marissa Hale became a doctor, she handed me divorce papers like they were a grocery receipt. 8 years. That's how long I had lived inside her dream while my own waited quietly in the background. 8 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, and reheated dinners eaten alone because she was always studying. 8 years of promises that once she graduated, everything would finally change, that we would finally begin. The graduation ceremony was on a Thursday in May. I had taken the day off weeks in advance. I even bought a new shirt. It felt important to mark the moment. After all, this wasn't just her achievement, it was ours. Or at least that's what I believed as I sat in a packed auditorium, watching Marissa walk across the stage in her cap and gown. When they called her name, I stood up and clapped harder than anyone around me. My chest felt tight with pride. 8 years of sacrifice had led to this moment. I told myself it was worth it. The ceremony ended around noon. Families hugged, laughed, and took photos. I waited by the car while she posed with her classmates, her diploma held like a golden ticket. When she finally walked toward me, I expected a hug, maybe a kiss, maybe a simple thank you. Instead, she handed me a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "Divorce papers," she said calmly, as if she were commenting on the weather. "I already signed." For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. I looked at the envelope, then at her face. There was no hesitation, no guilt. This wasn't sudden. This had been planned. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Completely," she replied. "I don't need you anymore. I have my degree, I have job offers, I have a future." I waited for her to soften the blow. She didn't. "You were helpful during school," she continued, "but that chapter of my life is over." Helpful. 8 years of my life reduced to one word. "So what was I?" I asked quietly. "Some kind of financial aid?" She shrugged. "You knew my priorities. Medical school came first. Now I'm a doctor, and I want to start fresh. No dead weight." Dead weight. That's what our marriage was to her. Around us, her colleagues were beginning to glance our way. Some of them recognized me, the husband who worked overtime to pay their friends' tuition. I opened the envelope and skimmed the pages. Everything was filled out. Assets divided. The apartment listed as hers. The car she wanted already claimed. I was left with the bare legal minimum. "You really thought this through," I said. "I'm not stupid," she replied. "I know what I want." Something inside me went quiet. No anger, no panic, just clarity. I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket and signed every page without reading further. Right there in the parking lot. When I handed the papers back to her, I met her eyes. "Congratulations on your graduation," I said evenly, "and your divorce." Her mouth fell open. "That's it?" she asked. "You're not going to fight this?" Why would I fight for someone who just called me dead weight? I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her diploma in one hand and our signed divorce papers in the other. Behind me, I could hear whispers starting to spread. I didn't look back. 3 days later, I was gone. Not just from the apartment, from the state, from her life, from everything that tied me to 8 years of being taken for granted. While Marissa was probably expecting tears, apologies, or a dramatic return, I was executing the cleanest disappearance of my life. She never paid attention to the finances. That had always been my thing. What she didn't realize was how much control that gave me. The lease was in my name. The utilities were in my name. Even the accounts she assumed were shared weren't as simple as she thought. By Saturday morning, I was loading my pickup truck with the things that mattered. Clothes, tools, my grandmother's china, and a collection of records she'd always complained about. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I chose Portland, Oregon for one reason. No history, no explanations. A clean slate. What Marissa didn't know yet was that removing dead weight had consequences, and she was about to feel every single one of them. Leaving wasn't impulsive, it was precise. 3 days. That's all I gave myself to erase a life I'd spent 8 years building around someone else. While Marissa Hale was probably telling her classmates about her exciting new future, I was quietly dismantling the illusions she believed she owned. The strange thing about being married to someone who never cared about finances is how invisible your labor becomes. She assumed things worked because they always had. Rent got paid, lights stayed on, groceries appeared in the fridge. She never asked how, she never needed to. What she didn't know was that for the last 2 years, I'd been paying the rent from my personal account. The lease was in my name alone, the utilities too. Even the internet she relied on for late-night research papers was under my control. On Friday morning, I closed our joint accounts and moved my half into a new bank she'd never heard of. I canceled the utilities, transferred my phone number to a new carrier, even shut down the streaming services she loved so much. None of it was done out of spite. It was simply separation, clean, legal, final. By Saturday, I was loading my pickup truck with the few things I actually cared about. Clothes, tools, my grandmother's china she never liked. My vinyl collection she always said was clutter. I left behind everything else without a second thought. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a goodbye text. If she wanted a fresh start, I wasn't going to interfere. Portland, Oregon wasn't chosen for opportunity. It was chosen for anonymity, a city where nobody knew my past and nobody would ask questions. The apartment I found wasn't impressive. 1 bedroom, 15 minutes from downtown, a view of a parking lot instead of a skyline. But it was mine, completely mine. Finding work was easier than I expected. Construction management for a mid-sized firm, solid pay, reasonable hours. No interest in my personal life, exactly what I needed. Back in our old city, reality was starting to set in for Marissa. The first shock came when she tried to pay the rent. Turns out landlords don't accept future doctor income as payment. When the electricity shut off 3 days later, followed by the internet, the picture became clearer. She texted me that first week, "We need to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. You can't just disappear." I deleted each message without opening them. The call started in week 2, 27 in one day. I let every single one go to voicemail and deleted them without listening. If she had something important to say, she could say it through her lawyer. By week 3, she was calling my old coworkers. My former supervisor reached out to warn me that a frantic woman claiming to be my wife had shown up at the office. I thanked him and told him I didn't have a wife. Month 2 brought panic. She tried using me as a reference for an apartment application, only to discover my number was disconnected. She contacted my sister, my parents, even an old college roommate. Each of them received the same response from me. "I don't know anyone by that name." Month 3 was the most desperate. She tracked down my new employer and called the main office, claiming there was a family emergency. My boss passed along the message. I told him the truth. There was no family emergency because there was no family by that name. He understood and quietly flagged her number. What Marissa didn't realize was that while she was unraveling, I was rebuilding. Portland suited me. The coffee was better. People minded their business. Nobody expected me to sacrifice my present for someone else's future. I joined a weekend hiking group, took evening classes in project management, started dating again. Not seriously, just enough to remember what normal conversations felt like. That's how I met Elena Brooks in a bookstore cafe. She had her own career as a graphic designer, paid for her own coffee, actually listened when I spoke. When I mentioned I was recently divorced, she didn't ask for details or offer advice. She just nodded and said, "Good for you for knowing when to walk away." No drama, no judgment, just acceptance. By month 6, I'd stopped checking to see if Marissa had tried to reach me. My days had a rhythm that belonged entirely to me. Work, gym, hiking, quiet evenings, peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd wanted a fresh start as a newly single doctor, but I was the one actually living it. 3 years passed. 3 years of growth, stability, and contentment. I was promoted to senior project manager, bought a small house with a yard, built friendships that felt real. Elena and I took things slow, steady, equal. Meanwhile, Marissa's fresh start wasn't unfolding the way she'd imagined. I found out later through someone who couldn't resist sharing the gossip. Residency paychecks weren't glamorous. Student loan debt was crushing. The apartment she claimed in the divorce became a financial trap. Without my income, she burned through savings and took on roommates. And then something changed, because 3 years into her struggle, Marissa stopped trying to survive. She started trying to find me. What she didn't know was that disappearing is easy. Staying gone is harder, and she was closer than I realized. I didn't know she was looking for me at first. That was the strangest part. For 3 years, my life had existed without even a shadow of Marissa Hale in it. She was a closed chapter, a finished sentence. I assumed she felt the same. I was wrong. It started quietly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned her name in passing, almost casually, like gossip that didn't matter. Apparently, her residency hadn't gone the way she'd imagined. Long hours, brutal schedules, debt that never seemed to shrink. The kind of reality no graduation speech prepares you for. Then came the car trouble. Major engine failure. Too expensive to fix. In the past, that would have been my problem to solve. I would have researched mechanics, compared financing options, called in favors. This time, there was no safety net. She took public transportation for months, watching her independence eat away at itself, one inconvenience at a time. That's when the regret sharpened. First, she tried social media. I wasn't there. I deleted everything years ago and never rebuilt under my real name. Then she reached out to mutual friends. Most didn't respond. Some told her, gently or not, that I didn't want to be found. She didn't listen. After 2 years of dead ends, she hired a private investigator. Spent money she didn't have chasing a man who had no interest in being caught. He found old addresses, former employers, distant relatives. None of it led anywhere useful. What finally worked shouldn't have. During her 3rd year of residency, she abused her access to medical databases. It started as a long shot, searching employment-linked health records across multiple states. She assumed I'd eventually need medical care somewhere, and if I kept the same kind of job, maybe a pattern would appear. It did. A routine physical through my employer's insurance flagged my location. Portland, Oregon. Construction industry. A name she recognized instantly. After 3 years of searching, Marissa finally knew where I was. What she didn't know was how much I'd changed. The call started on a Tuesday morning. 17 missed calls from an unknown number. Then the texts. I know you're getting these. We need to talk. I made a mistake. I deleted them without reading further. The calls escalated. Different numbers, borrowed phones, a pattern of desperation. 17 calls one day, 23 the next, 31 after that. I blocked each one without hesitation. Then she showed up at my workplace. The receptionist called while I was reviewing blueprints on site. There's a woman here claiming to be your wife. Says there's a family emergency. I asked for a description. It matched perfectly. Tell her I'm out of state on a project, I said calmly. Take her number. Someone will call her back. No one did. She waited in the lobby for hours, asking repeatedly if I'd arrived at another site. When she finally left, she handed over a handwritten note about our future together. My supervisor handled it professionally and flagged her information. We get crazy ex-wives sometimes, he said. I didn't correct him. That weekend, she drove around Portland looking for my truck. Apartment complexes, parking lots, restaurants. One of my hiking friends called to warn me that a woman had approached him at a coffee shop, showing an old photo of me. Monday brought a new tactic. She flooded neighborhood Facebook groups, Nextdoor, even Craigslist, looking for my husband. The posts were filled with regret and promises, photos from our marriage. Words meant to sound romantic but felt desperate. Elena Brooks showed me one of the posts while we were cooking dinner. This feels invasive, she said quietly. It is, I replied. The comments were brutal. Strangers pointing out what she refused to accept. Men don't disappear like this without reason. You don't lose someone this thoroughly by accident. By Wednesday, she had my address. I came home to find her sitting in her car across the street, parked there since noon. Neighbors were starting to notice. I entered through the side door and ignored the ringing, the knocking, the yelling. "I know you're in there," she shouted. "I drove 16 hours to see you." I called the police non-emergency line. When the officer arrived, he asked if I wanted to speak with her. I said no. He escorted her away. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "The police can't stop me from loving you." That's when I started documenting everything. 2 weeks of silence broke into obsession. An obsession always believes it deserves closure. She cornered me at Home Depot. I was loading lumber into my truck when I heard her voice behind me. "Please don't walk away. Just 5 minutes." I turned around. She looked exhausted, thinner, dark circles under her eyes. The confidence she'd worn on graduation day was gone, replaced by something raw and frantic. "5 minutes for what?" I asked. "To apologize," she said. "To explain. To ask for another chance." I closed the tailgate and faced her fully. "You had 8 years of chances," I said. "You used them all up in a parking lot." Her hands trembled. "I was wrong." "Yes," I replied. "You were." She stepped closer. "I love you." I met her eyes, calm and unmoved. "No," I said quietly. "You love the version of me that made your life easier." Her face fell. "What if I can change?" she whispered. I shook my head. "You don't get to rediscover someone once you've thrown them away." She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, because she was, and she still didn't know the one truth that would break her completely. She stared at me like the ground had just disappeared beneath her feet. "What do you mean, a stranger?" Marissa Hale asked, her voice barely holding together. "I mean," I said calmly, "the man you're talking to doesn't exist for you anymore." We stood there in the Home Depot parking lot, surrounded by people loading lumber and garden supplies, living normal lives. For her, the world had stopped. For me, it hadn't paused at all. "I was scared," she said quickly, desperation leaking into every word. "Medical school changed me. I thought I had to prove I could do everything on my own." "And once you thought you could," I replied, "you decided I was disposable. That's not fair." I almost smiled. "Fair? You filed for divorce the same day you graduated. You called me dead weight. You told me you didn't need me anymore. What part of that was confusion?" Tears finally spilled down her face. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." "Yes," I said again. "You did." She stepped closer, lowering her voice like proximity might soften reality. "We had something good before all of this. We can have that again. I've changed." I shook my head slowly. "No, you're desperate. There's a difference." Her face tightened. "So that's it? 8 years just erased?" "8 years taught me exactly what I deserve," I said, "and it wasn't what you offered." She looked at my hand, noticing the ring for the first time. "You're engaged," she whispered. "Yes." The word hit her harder than anything else I'd said. She physically stepped back. "When?" 3 months ago. We're getting married in September." But we could still." "We're not married," I cut in gently. "You made sure of that." She broke down completely then, sobbing in a way that turned heads. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." "How did you think it would go?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. She thought I'd be waiting, frozen, on pause, like a backup plan. "I don't wait around for people to figure out my value," I said quietly. "When you threw me away, I believed you, and I built a life without you." "I love you," she said again, clinging to the only card she had left. "I know you think you do," I replied, "but love isn't something you discover when your life falls apart. Love is what you protect when you have choices." She watched me get into my truck. I rolled the window down one last time. "Here's some advice. Next time you find something valuable, don't throw it away just because you think you found something better." I drove off, leaving her standing there, finally understanding what she'd lost. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my workplace again, this time claiming there was a medical emergency. My supervisor called security, but I asked to handle it myself. She looked worse than before, exhausted, hollow. "I just needed to see you," she said. "Please." I handed her an envelope. This is a restraining order. Any further contact becomes a legal issue. Her hands shook as she opened it. Then I handed her a second envelope. Inside was my wedding invitation. I'm not moving on, I said calmly. I already have. Security escorted her out. She didn't resist. At the door, she turned back one last time. Will you ever forgive me? I already did, I said. That's how I was able to let go. She left, and I never saw her again. 6 months later, I married Elena Brooks in a small ceremony, surrounded by people who had watched me rebuild my life from nothing. During my vows, I promised to choose her every day. Not just when it was convenient. She promised the same. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's living so well that the person who discarded you realizes they gave away something irreplaceable. She wanted a fresh start with no dead weight. I gave her exactly that, and built something better. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more real stories to life.